Coach DeMarco here with another Get Better Basketball Live. And today, if you're a coach who's looking to simplify the game prior to the season, you're not going to want to miss this episode. I have Saugus basketball coach and a friend of mine, Mark Schruedner, here to share with you how he plans to simplify the game for his team. You're not going to want to miss it. Another Get Better Basketball Live is up now.
You can probably tell that I'm using a lot of Chris Oliver speak here. And he's somebody that I admire his work. I actually got a chance to speak with him one-on-one over the summer and then another time in a smaller group. And I just think Chris Oliver does an outstanding job of recognizing the research around practicing like it's a game situation. So I look at this little, and I've printed this. This is right off of, if you just Google a practice tryout form, think about filling this form out, right? You're at tryouts. Let's say you've got 35 kids to monitor, or let's go even smaller, 25 kids, right? You've got to go through each kid and evaluate how they catch and shoot, how they shoot off the dribble, their range, their mid-range, their layups. How long are you trying out for? If you're going to do this with fidelity and you're going to actually go through the process of, it's like, this is just, it's a piece of paper to, kind of, I guess, cover yourself in case the admin or the parent or whatever wants to say, hey, my child deserves to be on this team. And now you have this piece of paper, but it's truly meaningless because if you're going to use it, it's not like there's no way that you can say, okay, well, so-and-so, in terms of their board pursuit, they were a little below this other kid. And it's like, how do you possibly measure one thing against the other, right? I think it's just a matter of, like, for me at tryouts, this year is going to be completely different, right? And you touched on already what COVID's done. I know it's different in different places, but in Massachusetts, we haven't had a summer league. We haven't had usually there's fall league options for people. Nothing of the sort has been available to us. For me, some of my players have done AAU in other states, and some of them have shot around in their driveway, but the access to team basketball has been so limited. My tryout is going to be very simple. We're going to play basketball for 2 hours. And at the end of those 2 hours, we're going to have tough decisions to make. I think that's always the case. You're going to have a tough time picking out your 10th, 11th, 12th kids. But the top 8 should stand out. You don't have to get them in order right away, right? But I think the main goal is here with tryouts is you're building up to a season. Most coaches, and this is another idea from Chris Oliver, when they start out, they only have like a few practices before they start a season, whether you're at the youth level, the high school level, what have you. And so when Chris Oliver did an international tournament, they went, I want to say, to Australia or maybe it was somewhere in Asia. Their Canadian team won it, and they basically right away just went right to 5-on-5 and just let the kids play. And I think that's, if you're going to do tryouts, make them play 5-on-5 basketball. You don't need to have them running sprints and puking in a barrel. Like, that's not simulating a game. So it's very, very simplistic, maybe oversimplistic, but to me, like, that's the most essential skill. Like, that's what we want players to do.
I think, Coach, too, as I'm looking at this extensive chart and, how often do you try to write one thing down and something else is happening on the floor and you miss some of that stuff. But just thinking about simplifying a chart like this, or even tryouts in terms of, you mentioned 5 versus 5, and obviously that's game-like and there's a lot of value in that. Are there some other things that you do or that you recommend in terms of tryouts?
So the 5-on-5 thing will be new for me this year. We've done a lot of like a simulation of transition drills in the past, and we've done some shooting stuff. I like to do a lot of shooting for 2 reasons. I'm going to talk on shooting in a second. For the obvious benefit of working on shooting, it's an essential skill. But The other thing that you get to do with shooting is you can have private conversations with individuals. So one of the things at our school, our policy is we don't like to post who made the team and who didn't. So we have to have that conversation with the kid. And it can be a tough conversation to have. So as kids are shooting and they're busy working on a drill within that, you can have conversations and go in depth with them about what you saw. And in that regard too, you're not missing 5-on-5 action. And other coaches can sort of facilitate the shooting. I like to go with myself and one other coach to have a conversation with the kid, so that in the event the kid disagrees or somebody gets the wrong idea of what the conversation was, there's a third party there as a witness to kind of verify what you said. But really, like, you can do 4-on-4, and I think there's value to that, and 3-on-3. If you shrink the game, you get more opportunities to kind of see, all right, who's boxing out. It becomes more obvious in terms of who cuts well and who moves well, the ball well. But ultimately, 5-on-5 is how the game is played, and you learn a lot about how kids relate to spacing and how they utilize their skill set. And I think that when you start to, one thing I don't know the NFL like you do, or like probably many of your viewers, but I always am kind of frustrated by how much emphasis is placed on guys 40 times and their verticals. And it's like, how does that translate to the game? Like, you can be the fastest player, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to catch the ball. Do you have the best set of hands? How's your IQ? And I think like 5-on-5 measures all those things. It's, when you want to evaluate who's going to make the best basketball player, I think that's the best way to do it.
Well, just one last question in terms of evaluating, and there's a lot of different philosophies on this, and I'm not saying there's a right philosophy, but even myself, I've done it different ways. I've had, a sheet like the one I'm looking at on the screen where it's very detailed, and I've had no sheet, and I've had less. And so what is it that you're looking to do, or what is it that you've done in the past that's worked well for you in terms of like assessing some of those players that, and this is always a tough part. There's players who are kind of on the cusp that are close to whether they're going to be JV or varsity, or they could get cut. And are there any suggestions that you have for coaches? And again, I don't think this is there's a one right answer to this, but I get a lot of questions from coaches about what do you do to evaluate players? What have you done in the past? And I'm always interested to hear some suggestions for what coaches do. And if you have a couple or just one thing that you're thinking of doing, I would love to, and I'm sure the coaches would love to learn more about it.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think there is a right answer, but a couple of things. So number one, in a typical year, I do attend the summer league games, and in Massachusetts, we're not allowed to coach the kids up, but we're allowed to see them play. And so that's number one. Like, I want to see who's invested, who's committed, at least to the point where they're willing to go to the games and they're in other communities, things like that. And obviously see their progress, right? Number two is I do look at their age, right? So if they're a kid that's, for us with girls basketball, I teach and coach in a smaller community. So in girls basketball, they hit their growth spurt sooner and they're ready to go essentially when they're freshmen, right? Athletically speaking anyway, the IQ might be a little behind. So if I have a freshman versus a junior, in general, I actually will keep the junior, providing that they fit with our cultural values. If they're a fit there, and I'll talk to them and I'll be honest with them, like, hey, you're probably like the 10th or 11th kid. And so like, if that's something that you're against, now is a good time for you to know. And I know this is tough right now, but that way in January or February, you're not pouting and upset about your role in the team, but we love you as a personality and a fit for us to make our team better at practice and all that. And for the most part, kids have stuck around for that, but we've had some kids walk out too. And the kids that do stick have really been instrumental in building our team, and they've fulfilled that role. And for those freshman kids that are like on the fence in that same situation, we tell them, you'd be the 10th or 11th kid right now, potentially, but we want you to develop on JV, get more playing time, get more game experience, etc. And again, I think that works out. And during the season, if injuries crop up or if their performance suggests that they need to be bumped up, we can bump them. I think it's always easier to bump a kid up and give their ego a boost during the season versus having them start out in a place where they're thinking that they're on top of the world, and then to kick them down a notch, psychologically speaking.
Yeah, I think you and I have a similar philosophy on that. Let players get their time at the lower level and really get that game experience. I think that's invaluable as opposed to maybe sitting on the varsity bench and not getting the minutes where they can get that experience, especially as a freshman. They have a few years to really grow and develop as a player. I'm fortunate that I've been able to take a look at this presentation ahead of time. So I know that a really important topic is up next, and one that I'm excited to see, which is practice. What practice looked like, I think, for coaches 10 or 15 years ago, or even when I was playing before that, and what it looks like now. I think it's really evolved quite a bit. So interested to hear about what you're planning to do this upcoming season for practice.
Right, and I took this image from one of my practice plans from that era that I was speaking of earlier, where we were struggling. And a couple of things that you might notice on this, first of all, I have zigzags on here, and that's something that I don't know if I believe in zigzags anymore. Just because it's like it doesn't go with the flow of a game. How often do you see that situation come up? I put on here quick rinse, which is like our thing for get a drink of water, and you can see it last for 5 minutes, which for me now would just be insane. What we do now is we tell the players, drink water whenever you want. Like, you don't need to ask us permission. Like, if you're not involved in the flow of the game, go get a water. Or if we're transitioning between, a shooting drill and doing some scrimmaging, go get some water, because that's how a game will go, right? And that way, too, we're not, taking up a separate amount of time for that. There's something on here called rocket drill, and it's a drill that I like in terms of getting shots up, but it just isn't game-like. I found that our players are, and this is something that my assistant coach was pointing out to me, we were still running it this season, but we ran it less this season than we ever have before, and the players enjoy the drill, so that's why we still ran it. But we were throwing a lot of middle outlet passes, like right to mid-court, and it would never happen in a game. It's the drill. Many coaches out there probably run some variation where you have 2 shooters and then a person taking a layup, and then the 3 basketballs are rebounded and you go back the other way and do the same thing. It's a constant drill where we're scoring it. It's got some competitive elements to it, but again, there's no defense, and the passes are just inconsistent with what the game is. So I have on here wisdom from Geno, Jay, and Tony. So Geno Auriemma, I went to see him coach in 2014. And for the first 30 minutes of practice, he said nothing. The players just did their thing. A trainer put them through their warm-up stretches, and they were playing 4-on-4 half court with against a group of boys. The ball never went into the corner, which I thought was just unique, right? I've seen UConn since, and they do throw it in the corner some. And about 30 minutes in, the player was Mariah Jefferson, if you remember that name. She was a point guard for them. And she took 3 dribbles. Geno blew his whistle, stopped it dead, and he said, "You just took 3 dribbles." And then she's about to talk, and he goes, 3 dribbles. You want me to show you the film? I'll show you the film. But you took 3 dribbles, and you got nowhere. If you're going to dribble, get somewhere. And that was it. And then they went back to playing for 10 more minutes. And it was like, that's a pretty good way to deliver a pretty important lesson, because I am obsessed with the dribble. But his feedback was so brief. It was so to the point. And like we've already, reiterated this point, but less is more. Jay Wright, I went to see Jay Wright, as you know, a couple summers ago. And I read his book, Attitude. And at his practice, for about an hour and 15 minutes, they played 5-on-5. And what I really liked about it, and it was something that kind of solidified ideas for me, is that he practiced so that it would be a fair game, right? Heterogeneous grouping, whatever you want to call it. So he had his best player and his fourth best player on one team and his second best and his third best on the other, right? And it ended up coming down to the wire. And all the while he's stopping and he's teaching, stopping and teaching. Not consistent with the game, I would say, right? In terms of like whenever he'd see something, he'd blow it dead. So he got about 20 timeouts per half, right? But, there was a purpose to it, to everything that he said. And toward the end of it, it was a 3-point game with under 5 seconds to go. And they had to go the full length. And so they designed up a play and what have you. And the player that was taking the shot had about 3 seconds to go, raised the ball up, got his man to lift up. You could tell right away that that was exactly what Jay had asked the offense to do. And he got to the free throw line and made 3 shots. And for me, it was just in terms of teaching end of game situations, like we always work on, okay, let's pull out our index card. We've got 40 seconds to go. Each team's in the bonus. And it's not genuine for the kids. They don't buy in as well. It's not intrinsically motivating, as if you did a scrimmage for a half hour, an hour, and all of a sudden in an authentic situation, okay, it's a 3-point game with 9 seconds to go. Both teams call timeouts. Hey, girls, we should foul them. What we should foul is a 3-point game. And now you're teaching them, hey, why are we fouling? And everything is so much more it's sticky in their minds, right, because of the fact that it's motivating. Tony Bennett, I saw practice not this past summer, but the summer before. So Virginia just won the national title. And, I mean, he's about as mellow as they come. Not a big yeller, not a big screamer. And in this particular practice, it was a summertime practice, they only get like about an hour with the players. And it was just great to see how much they did with that hour. Their shooting drills, everything was, they had managers or coaches put their hand up. Everything was active and moving quickly. And it was a reminder to me, like in our gym, we have a small gym and sometimes we have to share it with our JV team an hour and have to share the other hour. You can, if a college team is doing this and being efficient with it and they're a national champ, like I think anybody can. I just think that these are some of the best coaches out there, and I have much to learn, but they've found a way to make it simple. And, Jay Wright especially, if they can make it simple, then so can we as kind of the people that are aspiring to be great coaches.
Coach, I'm hearing from those are 3 amazing coaches, and I'm hearing from, in each instance, Geno, where, he didn't really say anything for that first X amount of time, 30 minutes or so of practice. Then he commented on the dribbles, and then, Jay Wright and Tony Bennett. But it seems like, less was more for them. And when, Geno finally talked, I'll use him as the example, it was really powerful. Because if you wait for a long time to finally say something, and I am guilty of talking too much at times, when you wait and then it's really a powerful statement in that situation. So just thinking about, you as a coach and, where do you kind of fit on that spectrum, and how have these coaches influenced you? I think specific to working with players, giving them feedback in practice, have you taken a step back, or were you already kind of a little bit more mellow, as you described, like a Tony Bennett? So where do you kind of fit in here, and how has this impacted you as a coach?
I think this is something that I need to grow in. Chris Oliver and so many other coaches this offseason just explain things and how they run their systems and how they run their practices is in such simplistic ways. I don't do that. That's what I've come to realize. So I think it's an area of growth for me personally. Like I love to hear myself talk. When we do film room, I love to go for 30 minutes, and it's great for me, but we're not coaching for us. We're coaching for the kids and their experience. So it's something that I really need to grow in. I think these guys is being very, very advanced, and they have the credentials to speak, and they're still not speaking to the extent that they could probably get away with. And so for me, as somebody who has none of those credentials, and probably many of your other coaches out there, with all due respect to them, I think it's something we can learn from.
Yeah, that was my first step, just film, having players in the film room. And for me to take a step back and for them to like watch a clip, look at themselves and really speak about what they did well, what they could do better. And for me to be able to take a step back and have them start to analyze that. And that was with a more experienced team that had been through film sessions, with me in the past, and they were kind of ready to take that step. But that was an important thing for me because, as I said, I definitely was someone, or probably still am someone who, to your point, I would say a lot and do a lot. And, to be able to take that step back and think about these three coaches doing it, it's pretty huge.